Hello and welcome to Immigration Trends 2017. I'm Jamie Gilpin. I'm the CMO and Workforce Analyst here at Envoy and excited to begin this webcast, which we will go over the insights and trends and data that we found from the survey that we conducted with Harris Poll Nielsen right at the end of 2016 and compiled all those results and created a great report of insights of best practices, challenges, and benchmarking data around immigration, global mobility, and ultimately employers' ability to find and recruit international talent around the world. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, I'm Jamie Gilpin. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and Workforce Trends Analyst here at Envoy. So what does that mean? So I've been in the HR and HR tech space for, about 15 years, spent a lot of time around talent acquisition with my former roles, and really got passionate around not only the skills gap, but really employers' ability to find and attract the best talent for their organization. And what I found more and more is that it is, as all of us know that are listening to this webcast, it is complicated. Finding the best people for an organization, and we'll get into some data in just a second, is one of the top challenges that companies have, and HR obviously plays an extremely critical role in that. And so what I found over last 15 years is that yes, there is obviously a ability for companies to find and recruit here locally in the U.S. Obviously a huge need to reskill and to invest in the education and training of our workforce, but there is an enormous amount of value and talent around the world, and a company's ability to not only find and attract that talent into their organization, but also to deploy that talent around the world is really that decider of success. And so have been honored to be a part of Envoy, which that is really our mission. And here at Envoy, at a really the core of who we are, we believe that people are happier, companies are stronger, and our world is a better place when people are empowered to work and live wherever opportunity beckons. And really, it's our mission for the past 20 years to make it easier for people to work anywhere in the world. And so just a quick thing about Envoy. So we combine expert legal representation with a proprietary technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, which we'll talk a lot about, mobilize their workforce, and manage their entire global workforce, again, from that one single platform. So we do that for quite a few customers, so over 1,000. We've been around since 1998 and have processed over 30,000 immigration type of cases through our platform. Here's a quick snapshot of some of the customers that we represent, honored to do so, and what we do for them. So here we are. We've conducted this study. I'll talk a little bit more in just a second about the study itself and how we conducted it and who was a part of it. But our agenda for this call is really what were the insights, the key insights. And if we boil it down, we've got the agenda here, but if we boil that down to what I would say are probably our three biggest takeaways. One, employers are prioritizing international talent. Not only because of the value they bring to the organization from a skills gap perspective, which we'll talk about, but from a global competitiveness, from a knowledge of foreign markets. There's lots of value in an international workforce, and so we'll talk about that in just a second. Obviously, they realize the importance of this talent in that. And then number two, they're investing in this talent. And we'll talk about this in a second, but 83% of employers are investing in immigration-related perks like travel and housing and cultural assimilation. And so not only are they investing in this talent from a perks and green cards perspective, but finally, although they are willing and wanting to invest in this talent pool, employers are frustrated by the immigration process, not only the U.S. immigration process, but really their global ability to attain work authorization for their employees. It's cost them budget, delayed projects, and even prompted them to get involved in advocacy efforts at the policy level. So that is our agenda for today, and I am really passionate about this, probably for, like I said, a little bit based on my experience and just what I've witnessed over the last 15 years or so in this space. But specifically when it comes to immigration and managing a global workforce and specifics around global mobility, this is an untapped opportunity for all intents and purposes for not only organizations but specifically for HR. And so, and I say that because, and probably many of you on the call today are thinking, well, yeah, that's why I'm here, and this is a big part of what I do. But if you look at the total job responsibility or functions within HR, SHRM did a fascinating study in July of 2016, and they asked their members of the 14 disciplines that HR really measures, where do all of these stack in terms of priority? And literally number 14 of 14, so dead last on that priority list, was immigration and global mobility. And you can see the quote here, but being aware of global workplace issues should be equally as important to the HR community as more U.S. organizations add global operations and global links in their supply chain. So a super critical time, I would say. This was in July, so I wonder how this survey would happen, or what would happen with the survey if it was put into market and field now, especially post some of the current occurrences that have been happening with the administration. But it is changing, and that's why we believe studies like this are so critical important to that, in benchmarking what what that focus should be on global mobility and how you put together a strong, efficient, and efficient process for global mobility and global talent management within your organizations. Because we can see here, business needs are evolving. The ability for organizations to manage their global talent efficiently will mark the difference between success and failure. And we'll talk about a few more of those stats from PwC, but this is a growing discipline, but also a growing need within organizations, and HR plays really at that linchpin or critical point. So let's dig into the survey itself. We, again, like I said, we partnered with Harris Poll, a division of Nielsen, and it was in field from November 28th to December 16th, so right after President Trump's election. And responses came from 442 HR professionals and hiring managers. It was about split 50-50 between HR and then hiring managers within those organizations. You can see it was definitely a wide variety of industries and also employee sizes, but you can see there about the STEM areas, so science, technology, engineering, math, employers represent about 43% of the respondents. Manufacturing was a big portion of it. 23% of the respondents were from companies of 20,000 employees or more. 26% said that their companies have at least 1 to 5 global locations, and then 54% were private, while 41% were from public companies. So that gives you a good idea of just the diversity of the respondents and why this data is going to be really critical for benchmarking not only immigration programs but overall talent management programs within organizations. So we conducted this survey, and here's the backdrop that we're working in. In the global talent landscape, there is a significant challenge that employers are having in finding the best talent for their organization. 38% of employers worldwide, according to Manpower Talent Shortage Survey, 48%, so half of U.S. employers report difficulty filling jobs. Adecco did a study that 2.4 million STEM jobs will go unfilled by 2018, which is less than a year from now. 40 million shortage of high-skilled workers globally by 2020, so that's in less than 3 years. And on the flip side of that, so we've got a skills gap issue, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's happening. But the other side of this is there is an expectation change within our own employee base, an engagement issue that we have. So 71% of millennials, according to PwC, want and expect an international assignment. International assignments increased by 25% in the last 10 years and expect to double by 2020. So it's not just hiring or acquiring talent from overseas, but it's also our ability as organizations to deploy or mobilize our current workforce across the globe to take advantage of opportunities. It's not only mission critical for businesses, but also an expectation now of our employee base. And so, probably most of us have seen this data around, but the hardest jobs to fill are not too surprisingly the skilled trades, IT, right, engineering, technicians, the STEM heavy, the sales representatives, drivers. I mean, it's not just limited to those STEM. All jobs are becoming a challenge for organizations to fill currently. And why is that happening? STEM is probably the easiest to explain because it's really an issue of supply and demand. So over the last, especially over the last few years, the demand for STEM jobs or jobs posted within the STEM categories have been up and to the right. So demand is increasing. You can see there 40 to 85% depending, where it's only been about 30% for non-STEM jobs, but still, again, it's increasing. Why is that happening? Well, part of it is we are not training enough of our workforce to go into these areas. You see here that engineering from a U.S. bachelor degree perspective, has been flat, while all other fields, psychology actually being the fastest growing, has been up and to the right. So there is definitely a challenge with actually producing enough of employers or workforce with these skills. And so it's not too surprising that another great study by PwC, they ask CEOs, they do their annual CEO study, and not too surprising in terms of CEOs' concern about economic policy, social, environmental, and business threats to their organization being able to grow. Number 3, 77% of CEOs say availability of key skills is what I'm most concerned about, and that was actually number 4 and number 5 in the years prior, so it's jumped up to number 3. And further, when asked, okay, so if skills are your number 1 challenge, how are you overcoming those within your organization? You can see there, right in number 3 and number 4, 1, we move talent to where we need it, and we seek out the best talent regardless of demographics or geography. So we start to see, that this idea that global talent and managing this effectively is on the minds of our CEOs. And so how do we as HR take this information and ultimately create a great program internally? And we hope, and that's really the goal of the study, is that you can see what other organizations are doing, how you can benchmark through that, and how you can make recommendations for your own organizations to either improve your current program, especially if you're in one of those larger organizations that already has a pretty robust global mobility program, or create one, obviously, if you're one of the smaller businesses. So the number 1 key takeaway that I talked about is hiring and developing global talent or international talent is critical. So as we look at the data, we asked, obviously, why foreign national talent is mission critical for your organization, and rank these in terms of very, extremely not important at all. And 7 in 10, so about 70% of employers reported back that they fill the skills gap. That's number 1. Global competitiveness is right behind it, but also they bring value, new perspectives to the way our company does business. They have knowledge of markets, right, business practices and cultures outside the United States. And the other side of it, and goes back to that expectation of seeking work authorization outside of the U.S. or global assignments, international transfers are critical to managing and expanding our global business. So you can see here it is an extremely important part to the global talent acquisition strategy to ensure that it's a global talent acquisition strategy and not just domestic. And so not too surprising, according to the study, 63% of employers say sourcing foreign national employees is extremely to very important, but actually if you bring that down all the way to somewhat, it's about 93% that say that this is at least of somewhat importance to them in their talent acquisition strategy. So I think this is probably one of the biggest surprises that I had because we did this study in prior year in 2016, and we asked this question: what percentage of employers expect their company's foreign national headcount to increase? Last year, 34% of employers said they expect it to increase. This year, 55%. And that is such a significant jump, and obviously all of us here at Envoy, and even with Harris Poll, and we've had several interviews about this, are asking why the sudden jump, and there's lots of speculation as to why that is, but I think part of it is really just there has been such a spotlight that's been put on immigration, and the fact that this could be something that that employers have in some way taken for granted, that hey, this will always be a talent pool that we can lean on. In recent months, and especially just right post-election with the new administration, this is something that people are questioning. Brexit is another one that has happened, globally. Again, a policy or a economic or a political situation that could impact, companies' ability to take advantage of this opportunity. And so I think that might be what we're seeing here in terms of the increase. The other side of it is, and going back to that expectation to send employees abroad, 59% of employers expect their demand for work authorization outside of the United States. So again, sending employees outside globally on projects and otherwise to increase 59%, which is also a staggering number, but also just a sign of the demand, but also the need for employers to be able to capitalize on these global opportunities. So what are employers doing? How are they investing in this talent? So they know, hey, we need this international landscape or international talent pipeline, and to get this talent pipeline, it is becoming more competitive for this talent, and so we have to get more creative with our perks and benefits packages. Yes, healthcare, childcare, PTO, work from home, all of those are extremely important for your employee base at large. But what are some of those? What are some of those immigration type related perks that organizations are investing in? So 83% are doing something, and how that breaks down: 40% are paying for dependent visas or green card applications for family members. 40% are paying for travel, so airfare to visit, the employee's home country, or even airfare for immediate family members' travel. Housing, this is probably one of the more common and ones that are not as surprising to people. Of course, they're helping, especially relocation companies, with corporate housing, especially in the interim as employees obviously acclimate and get their feet underneath them as they start the new job. Immediate green card sponsorship, and we'll talk about green cards in a little bit in further detail of when that happens, how often, how much the employer is paying for. Finally, transportation, so car services, cultural assimilation training, again, secondments or overseas assignment opportunities. And again, only 17% said that they don't offer any sort of immigration-related perk package. And so, one of the questions that we get quite often from our customers is, what should our immigration policy be? So think about the perks that we just went over in that, but also how much should we be spending? What should our overall immigration budget look like? Now, obviously, this is going to range dramatically by company size in terms of total immigration or global mobility spend. But I think what is probably a little bit easier to benchmark is per employee or individual that you are sponsoring. What does that look like? So in terms of those immigration-related perks, 38% of employers are spending over $16,000 for each individual. And that is a significant investment for organizations, especially as we think about obviously the importance of this talent pool, but also the expense not only of just the immigration perks that you see here, but also just the sponsorship itself. Even, this obviously includes relocation and all of that, but it is a significant investment for employees, and obviously a competitive advantage for them if they can put together a package that is again competitive in the marketplace. So let's talk about those green cards a little bit more, because that is, if we talk about competitive advantage, a question that we always get. What are other employers doing? So more than 71%, more than 7 in 10 sponsored a foreign national for a green card. That's an 8 percentage point increase from last year's report. So more companies are sponsoring for green cards. And when we ask, how they make that decision to sponsor, 67% say a case-by-case basis. 67% say it's really a performance. It's based on performance, and that's at the leader's discretion. 45% say, hey, it's just at the business leader's discretion, whether that's performance or otherwise, they decide. And then 38% said it's based on tenure. And so that kind of correlates to when they start the application process and some differences between 2016 and 2017 immediately. So not too surprising, 30% of employers are starting that, or actually I should say that is a little bit surprising, 30% of employers are starting that green card process immediately. And we're actually starting to see a shift in that even in our own customer base now, especially with some of the uncertainty with the current policy changes of the administration, that employers are looking at this policy and saying, hey, we may need to start the green card policy a little bit early, or the green card process earlier than perhaps we would have, and let's look at this policy and figure out how to do that. But 66%, if you take the immediately and after the first year of service, are starting that green card in that first year. And then another percentage, 28%, are starting it in 3 years. So in other words, right after that H-1B first visa renewal. So it gives you an idea of what your policy looks like, and I think that's an important aspect of this. Thinking about your own policy, how does this compare? Is it competitive? And what recommendations would you make to your team and to leadership as to how to make that more competitive in this day and age? And so the other question we get is, do you have, obviously there are certain parts of the green card policy, or excuse me, green card process that that employers have to cover in those first few stages. But once you hit that I-140, do companies continue to pay for all of the green card fees? And in fact, actually 84% say no, we pay for all of the green card fees. Now 42%, half of them, or 42% of employers say, hey, yes, we pay for all of them, but we have a payback. Especially if the employee leaves after a certain time period. But I think this is really important to note, especially as you're competing for this talent and thinking about those overall immigration-related perk packages. So as we move into how your organization is handling immigration, I think this is a really important area to discuss. What does that infrastructure look like? Where does it report into? Again, how many people are managing that function? Are you outsourcing? Are you using partners? How are you managing, not only immigration, but just building out your entire global workforce management platform? So big question, how many resources do you put on this? And when I say resources, I mean people, headcount resources. And so almost half of employers say 9 or more people handle the majority of responsibilities surrounding immigration and global mobility. That is a large department, especially if it reports into HR, but almost, again, 46% of employers say that. A small percentage say that they actually outsource, so 3% of employers say they outsource the whole thing. Not too surprisingly, and you can see more of this data in the report itself, but as you break down, by number of global locations, as you break down by employee size, you obviously start to see these numbers shift up as the larger the organization, and down the smaller the organization. So benchmarking your organization and size is really important on this. And again, we have all of that data in the report itself, so I would encourage to check out the details there. So when it comes to how your organization is handling immigration, we also get this question, especially from some of our organizations that have started to scale. Immigration kind of was thrown into this department of HR's lap. A lot of times it's recruiting or talent acquisition, especially in startup mode. And now they're asking us, okay, it's been in talent acquisition or recruiting. Is this where it should be? Should it be in another part of HR? Should it be in operations? Well, according to our data here, 40% of the time, U.S. inbound immigration reports into HR. Behind that is talent acquisition, and then operations, and then legal, you can see there, and then an actual global mobility department, finance, and otherwise. We also asked, in terms of, so that was inbound or U.S. immigration. So what about your global or outbound immigration? Where does that report into? And it's actually pretty similar. So 38% reporting into HR, but behind that is operations, and then talent acquisition, global mobility, legal, and otherwise. So again, if we think back to the top of this conversation or presentation, and HR's focus on this, and it being number 14 at the same time, it being the prime responsibility of HR. This is a really big opportunity, I think, for us to think about how this fits into the global HR talent management process, how it fits in more effectively, and how we can put a priority on it. And so when we dug into this a little bit more, because global mobility, although it's been around for a while, companies are starting to invest more and more in this. So does your department or does your organization have a global mobility department? Yes, 70% say yes. And again, pursuant to the other two slides, 49% of the time it's reporting into HR. And so the next question, so you've got, half of employers have at least 9 people focused on this part of their talent strategy, and you've got a majority of that reporting into HR, at least most of the time, at least 40% of the time. And so what are they using to actually manage this process? So on the inbound side, not too surprising, especially as we talk to companies before they come aboard to Envoy, they're using desktop software, right? You're using Excel spreadsheets, you're using Outlook to manage, passing documents back and forth. You're using Outlook reminders to remind yourself of expiration dates or next steps in the visa application process, but that's a pretty big chunk of what people are using. And then there's also a good amount that are using their internal legal team. You can see there 19%, and then a good portion that are using an external law firm. And the other side of it is the outbound side. So, and then, excuse me, before I get all the way over there, something that I should hit on, especially in this, a lot of companies are using some sort of technology-powered immigration platform, and they're using that really for the entire process. And so, and Envoy is obviously an example of that. And then others are using a technology immigration platform, but it's really just to upload documents, and that's probably, and you can see here, that's actually more common. And then the outbound side, internal legal or global mobility team, that is a big portion of how they're actually managing the outbound or non-U.S. Type of global immigration. They're also using an internally created team. They're using external law firms. Relocation companies is also a big one. But obviously the use, not only the amount of people that are actually managing this process, but the tools that they're using are very diverse. And so part of the challenge, I think, is when we get to the immigration challenges, there are vast, and we'll get into those right now. So I think part of the challenge is obviously from a policy perspective, and we'll talk about that. Majority of employers say that the U.S. immigration process has inhibited their ability to do much of their business needs that they have. But the other side of it is just managing the actual immigration process, the actual securing of the visa or application, getting the employee work authorization, bringing them on board. There's lots of challenges within that, what I really like to refer to as the parts that we can control. We can't control once we send the application off to the government, either here in the U.S. or outside, but what are the parts that we can control? And if we've got at least 9 people working on this with a variety of tools to do so, why is it that we are still having a significant challenge with managing this? So digging into this, only 17% of employers say that U.S. immigration system has had no impact. So 83% of employers say that the U.S. immigration system has had an impact. We've, on top right up there is 30%, we've had to increase our budget. We are engaging in advocacy efforts. We're hiring more people, we're delaying projects. Another stat that's not on this slide particularly, but 21% of employers say that we are actually offshoring our projects and our workers because of the U.S. immigration process. So there's a significant impact of the policies that we are instating, not only previously, but also with the current administration. And so, and we'll get to this in a second when we go over what we think needs to change. But the other side of this is what I talked about, leading up to this session, which is, hey, there are those areas of this that we can control, and one of those is how we process immigration in our organization. So again, 9 people focused on this, a plethora of tools that we're using, yet 31% of employers say gathering foreign national documents and information is my biggest pain point in managing the U.S. inbound immigration process. Fear of missing a deadline is right behind that. But actually, if you add up foreign national anxiety and fielding questions from foreign nationals, that makes up about 25%. So also a bit significant portion. And then behind that, attorney responsiveness. Now, on the global side, you've got differing regulations in each country, you've got maintaining accurate records, you've got understanding the differences between business travel and work permit, all on kind of that global landscape. And then you've got a good amount of people that have no challenges, which means I bet they have a really great partner that manages all of this for them. And so as we look at specifically with the U.S. immigration, gathering foreign national documents and information being the biggest pain point, but then also managing those expectations, RFEs is another issue or challenges that we are facing. 57% of STEM employers say that their RFEs have increased in the past 5 years. That's up 9 percentage points from 2016. And so as we look at that and we look at even the STEM areas, even there, over half of employers are saying, yes, my RFEs have increased. And so looking at that and looking at the challenges, some of the recommendations, if you will, that organizations have and ultimately saying, hey, U.S. immigration has to be better. It has to work more for business. And the way that we think that they can do that is have quicker processing times, allow more expedited filing. Well, there is a challenge there because we just had a USCIS update to the premium processing rate for H-1Bs. They've put that on hold for at least for this season for H-1Bs. On the flip side, employers are saying, I need quicker processing time. I need to allow more expedited filing. So a challenge there. Hey, another big percentage of employers are saying reform the green card process, increase the annual allotment, and decrease waiting times is another important part. And then the other side of it is lower fees, not too surprising, but also improved insight. And I think this gets into some of the challenges around managing foreign national anxiety, missing a deadline, right? Improving insight for your employer, for your employee, into their case processing and initiatives, improve insight for USCIS case processing, and then right behind that, so about 75% actually of employers think that it's extremely important to increase the cap for H-1Bs, and obviously just following up from our previous slide, lowering their request for evidence rate, because that is going up, and seemingly, at least from what we are hearing, there doesn't seem to be all that much of a case for why those RFEs are increasing. It just seems to be relatively arbitrary. So here are some of the ways that employers are saying, hey, here's how you could help us. But finally, as we conclude, I think, I guess more so than anything else in this study, and just as we talk to, our over 1,000 customers and obviously many more prospects out there, again, there is a talent shortage, right? It's obviously for those key STEM skills. It's obviously for those skills on paper, but also just a a talent shortage in terms of the right fit, bringing that diversity of thought into our organizations. Diversity of backgrounds and experiences is so critical. That diversity is so critical for our organizations, and so global talent is a key competitive advantage to not only closing that skills gap, but creating that engaged workforce. And the other side of it is that, not too surprisingly, that employers are investing in this global talent. They are predicting increase to hire more, to need more in terms of global mobility. We're investing in this global talent. HR leads the delivery of this critical function of talent mobility and overall global workforce management. And so how can we use, not only leverage the data and studies like this to ensure that we are benchmarked and our immigration and global mobility programs are up to standard, or at least more competitive in terms of advantage of acquiring and retaining this key talent, but also that just ultimately overall that we are having more conversations around this, that it doesn't continue. If we look at this SHRM study in July of this year, that it's not 14 on this list, that we as not only as HR, but really as corporate leaders are coming to the table saying, hey, global talent is important to us. The ability to send our employees is important to us. How do we make that more effective within our organizations? How do we ensure that the 9 or so people that we have are the most effective, they have the most effective tools? And that's obviously something that we are are really passionate about. So I will just leave the podcast or the the webcast with this. We are, like I started the presentation, we are extremely passionate about making it as effortless as possible for people to work anywhere in the world, and we take that very seriously. We have a focus on not only bringing expert legal representation through our Envoy affiliated law firm, but also a extremely intuitive proprietary technology where we have a large staff of engineers working on it to deliver literally the only platform that's out there that makes it seamless for companies due to the entire global workforce life cycle, from hiring, securing that work authorization in the US and otherwise, to mobilizing that talent across the world, to ultimately managing that from forecasting to budgeting, to tracking your employees across the globe, managing expirations, renewal dates, but also giving your entire company a really clear 10-foot view of what immigration is going to look like, what resources that you will need to secure all of the immigration needs you need throughout the year, and what that will look like in 1, 2, 3, 4 years from a forecast and budget perspective. So that concludes our webcast on Immigration Trends 2017, brought to you by Envoy. And again, I'm Jamie Gilpin. You can find this report at envoyglobal.com/immigration trends. And obviously you can find this report and much, much more in terms of resources, visa and U.S. Immigration 101, the latest in policy updates and changes that occur, that have been occurring over the last few months, all at envoyglobal.com. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And goodbye.